as we wait for the rest of folks to come in and sort of get sorted here, I just wanted to introduce myself if y'all haven't met me yet. I'm the chair for the Austin chapter of IDSA, and then we've got a couple of folks from our chapter here, and then our leadership, and then we partnered with Atlanta this time last year. I think it was yesterday last year, so it was 366 days ago. We started a, I don't know what even to call it. We started this journey, if you will, um, and yeah. So we thought about a month ago, we said, hey, you know, it's coming up on an anniversary of this quarantining, and so here we are. Let's do another event together, and we actually felt like this was a great kickoff to this collaborative chapter collaboration series that we're doing. I'm gonna kick it off to Stephanie. If you can get give us your tips and tricks and tell us what it's been like. I'm gonna mute myself over here.
So hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Lewis. I am currently a fourth year at Georgia Tech. I'm also interning at Tektronix Industries right now and soon to be full-time once summer hits. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I've done in the past year, how that's changed with COVID, and kind of some things I've learned, some tips and tricks. So first, to give you a history about what I've done, it's changed a lot in the past year. When COVID first hit, I was a full-time intern, and summer I did completely online school as well as online TAing. Fall was hybrid school, and this semester is completely online school part-time and interning hybrid part-time. Which kind of leads me into one of my first points, which is something that I hope sticks around after COVID, and that's the ability to work and do school remotely. Because of that, I'm able to do school and intern in two completely different states, which is an opportunity that I never would have had if things didn't become virtual. I guess about a year ago now. So that part was something really cool that ended up coming out of it, and that's kind of another tip that I have is just to make the most of every situation, because some cool things have come out of it. But being that I'm doing school and interning at the same time leads to a lot of really busy days. And so one of the things that really helps me stay on top of it is my Outlook calendar. And that's changed kind of throughout what I've been doing. Sometimes it was a Google Calendar, sometimes it was Outlook. But right now I schedule both school and work on that. And sometimes it's down to the hour if there's a lot to do, but that definitely helps me stay on track. Also, digital sticky notes are a thing. And I find those really helpful because you can kind of change what you have on there all the time, which is great. As far as kind of the work-life school balance, the biggest thing that I've found to be helpful is just creating boundaries, even if they're not there because it's just always home. Some things that have really helped me are both weekly and daily boundaries. As far as the daily boundaries, I always make sure to like shut down my computer at the end of the day and kind of plan so that I know, hey, I don't have to look at this until XYZ time tomorrow. And usually that's 7 a.m. for me. And then as far as weekly, I block it off. So like 7 a.m. Monday to 5 p.m. Friday is work and school time. And what that allows me to do is take off Friday night and Saturday and just not have to look at anything work or school related. And I found giving myself that break really has helped me to not burn out. Which leads me to another tip, which is to plan something fun to do each week. Whether that's just taking a walk, trying a new place for takeout, going on a hike, just planning something to look forward to, and finding a reason to get out of the house and get moving for a little bit has helped a lot and not getting so stir crazy and staying sane. But that also leads me to one of the things that I miss the most about pre-COVID, which is just being able to interact with people without having to consider all the risk that goes with it now. Just, being able to get lunch with coworkers, being able to have that studio culture where you can just go up and start talking to someone about their work, and just both start sketching on the same piece of paper and having that collaboration a little bit more naturally is definitely something that I miss. But since we are working at home, some things that I found to help create a really nice work environment are a comfortable chair, which I've almost destroyed mine at this point, multiple screens, though there's a limit. If you have 5 open on your desktop, I realize that is too many. Natural light as well as blue light lenses also have helped not feel like I'm in such a cave of just electronics. And finally, to finish it off with 2 lessons that I've learned. The first being that motivation isn't always going to be there, and that's where discipline and dedication really get important, especially when there aren't so many external factors to stay motivated when you're just at home. And lastly, just again, make the most of every scenario, no matter how difficult or hard. I believe you can always find something to learn or grow out of it. Yeah, thank you. That is my update in 5.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie. It's definitely it's good to hear. It's good to hear that you're adapting well, and also that you're able to find the positives in it. Right? There's a lot of that work from home stuff that's different for a lot of people, especially when we go from having the opportunity to be in the same place and then not be there. Abigail, you want to go next? I believe that you were a recent grad and you had to find a job during the this COVID times. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I did. Hi, everybody. I'm Abby Ambrogi. Yeah, I graduated last May. So before I get into that, though, I am going to begin with an embarrassing moment. So last week, I cried when I scheduled my vaccine. And I'm not talking like one tear, I'm talking tissues, everything. Then I made a Spotify playlist called I Scheduled My Vaccine. And then that made me cry even more. Total mess. And yeah, I'm an emotional person. I'm a UX designer, so that's that. But I also like I have been so blessed and so lucky that all of my family has been healthy this year. So I haven't really had any profound losses, maybe no real reason to cry. But collectively, we have had so many little moments lost that compound to create kind of this vast sadness for us. Like after spring break, all of my friends disappeared and moved, and we didn't get to say goodbye, and we graduated remotely, and all these crazy things. And I haven't even met my coworkers in person. Um, but now we're at the end of the tunnel, and it's amazing that we're here. And I just want to make sure that I'm never going to forget how I felt this year, but I also don't want to forget how I got here. And it's with 2 things: some soft skills as opposed to some hard tips and tricks, patience and faith in myself. So graduating this last year was like sending yourself off a cliff, having no idea how you were going to land. Um, when I graduated, unemployment for my age was at 15%, with no end to the pandemic in sight. And every day I still had to force myself to wake up and apply to jobs. And anyways, and a lot of days I didn't do that. And I felt horrible because I didn't do it. And anybody that's been unemployed knows that it's really demoralizing every day. And on top of that, you're a student, so you don't have work experience. So kind of a mess. And it took a lot of value, but eventually I just realized I was so annoyed with the whole thing. And I didn't have any choice but to be my own cheerleader. And I had to decide, even if I didn't believe it, that I was worthy of a job, I was skilled, and that I would be valuable to any team. And in the end, I applied to like 90 jobs. And believe me when I say I would not have made it out without those important soft skills of faith and patience in myself. So then I started working, and I was so excited to get started. I'm honestly just so excited to meet people for the first time all year. And I love working remote because I am a person that's never been on time in my life. So not having a commute is like a gift from God. Um, and it's not that weird to me that I haven't met my coworkers, but I am a UX person. I'm a people person, and I love what I do because I get to understand how people tick and how I can make their lives easier. And I also think that my biggest strength in the workplace is interpersonal and communication skills. So having kind of all of those things taken away, all of my strengths taken away, I really had to reevaluate um, who I was and how I kind of fit into the workplace. And that was really difficult. And right off the bat, I had this first little presentation. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, but I completely misinterpreted the instructions on my first assignment. And it felt like this huge letdown to contrast to what I had envisioned for, applying to jobs all these times and for so much time, and then having your first presentation be kind of a flop. Um, but so now that communication is so different and I can't read people and their visual cues, I really had to take a new look at my strengths and again be patient with myself as I navigated this new kind of environment and my skills. And I also had to have faith that I would learn and improve, which I did with the wonderful help of my amazing mentor, Veronica, who's here on the call. Um, and now I'm finally, months later, just now hitting my stride at work, and figuring out how do I connect with my coworkers? How do I present work to each person based on their own priorities and values? And I'm learning new things about myself. So I would say that my TLDR for you is that graduating and working from home really sucked. It was so hard, but I cried when I got my vaccine because I proved to myself that I could do it. And as soon as we're allowed to go back to work, you can find me in my office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Yeah, so please feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. It was a whirlwind, but thanks for letting me share today.
Thank you for being vulnerable, because sharing some of those things is hard, right? Yeah, awesome to get that, like, a little bit of an inside peek about how you're able to, take that deep breath and have faith in yourself. Well done. That's awesome. Adam, are you ready to give us a little bit of more insight from the instructor's perspective? Oh, Veronica's got
okay. All right. I think I'm good. I think I have a window here. I apologize about that, but of course I've apologized throughout this whole
No
time with my students. So I'll try to make it fast here. So obviously, as I was saying, any personal relationship, it's always difficult if it's long distance, right? If you're only just reading or writing or things like that, you want that face to face. And teaching that, I believe that's a very critical thing because it builds personal connection. Something else that I think from a teaching side, and this is it may not apply as much to all, I think, academic institutions. It may be a little bit more particular um, to our institution and the student body. But, I think COVID, especially for the students, any student who goes to college, that transition from high school to college is already a challenge. And I think obviously we all were students at one point, right? And we know that that was a challenge. But I think COVID has made it more difficult, especially with students who already have psychological issues, behavioral, drug issues, attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, things like that. That certainly has not helped. And the students who I know who have those issues, certainly it has not been a positive. It has been more of a negative. So where you're working with those students before COVID on a very personal level and private level, it's just sort of magnified a little bit more. Also, I think for some students, because of COVID, and we all read the news and unemployment and things like that, right? So, I mean, I feel very fortunate as a teacher in a public institution that, hey, I've kept my job. I just work from home and my kids run in and out and I get aggravated, but hey, I still get a paycheck. for quite a few of our students, COVID has caused a problem in terms of how they can learn and time manage because some of them, their parents have lost jobs. So they have to go and they're full time now. So they do full time teaching and full time working. Or one of the parents is unemployed and lost a job because of COVID, right? If they're in the restaurant industry, service industries, things like that. So that has been a tremendous impact on some of our students. We have issues of homelessness, so they don't have enough money, and so they put their money towards college, but they don't have a house. They don't have any place to live. So we work with some students to try to find a place where they could have a, a roof over the head. Um, Digital delivery is based upon this idea that society is actually equal and that there is no digital divide. I'm fortunate that when COVID started, I bumped up my internet and I got fiber optics to my house. Right, so I was fortunate that I was able to do that. But other students, this idea that you can deliver digital content and everybody has access that's not the reality. Many of our students don't actually have that, and or the amount of money that they have it can't deliver, right? And we've all experienced that, right? The slow internet, and even me, my computer crashes. I got a timeout for 15 minutes to let my computer kind of calm down and reboot. For students who don't have that economic situation, that makes it incredibly difficult, and of course very frustrating on an everyday basis. So I mean, on the positives, I think certainly academic institutions are naturally, I think, more conservative than businesses who are able to sort of pivot and move faster. So that has definitely made us adapt quicker, which is unusual for large academic institutions. And from the student side, I do have to say their digital techniques have definitely improved. That's what they have to rely on. So, and I will end it right there. 20 seconds.
Nice job. Yeah, you brought up a bunch of things that I, to be totally honest, have not even thought about, right? Like I run my own design studio now, and so I'm in a different position than a lot of people, right? Um, we'll kind of jump into some questions later, but just the idea of putting all of the money that you would put to rent to college is like, that's heartbreaking. That's really rough for me to hear. It's like I want to help, but we can kind of come back to some of that stuff later. Let's see who is next. I think Mark. Mark, if you can tell us about the role that you play and the being in the management on the management side.
Sure. So hi everybody. Some of you I know, some of you I have yet to meet. My name is Mark Gilson. I'm design director at Fahrenheit Design in Austin, actually just a little bit outside Austin in Round Rock. And we are a studio of currently 7 people. Newly got an engineer on board. At the beginning of this, a little over a year ago, we were also 7. Yes. We had an intern at that stage, Erica. Hi. And with also one new hire who had started in January of last year. And that was sort of our situation. So I'm not the owner of the firm, but I've been with Fahrenheit for close to 15 years now. That's a long time. So I'm sort of embedded in it, in the business and a lot of the aspects of all the goings on. But I would say, I mean, that sort of sets the scene for that. But the real scene is sort of like probably my own personal experience over the last year has been like looking around relatively mild in terms of effects of COVID directly on my life. So I know that many people have had things happen a lot worse. I mean, I've like everyone here has gone through different things. But you know, my family is all in Australia, and had relatively low or no effects from COVID, apart from everything, you know, sort of shutting down and nobody getting in or out. And my wife's family are all here, and we've had the benefit of everybody, you know, maintaining employment and stuff like that. But in terms of what we've had to deal with at Fahrenheit, I think it's been difficult because, like, as somebody in management or giving direction to people, particularly like creative direction, there's a lot of trust that has to go on between people, and building relationships is really important part of that. And you know, we had one of our designers, Jack, started in January of last year, and I know that he would tell you it's probably been a difficult year for him to like start a job and then be like, okay, everybody take your computer and go home, and you know, we'll see you in whenever we see you. But for us, so it has been difficult in that way, and we've been discovering new tools to get around those sort of things. I don't know if we've got it right a lot of the time, but what we've tried to do is be at least as transparent as we think we can be with people about how we're going to approach things. You know, we had some slow times, and that's difficult to deal with. Now we're once again back up running sort of full speed, so that's good for us and for everybody. But you know, it has been one of those things. You know, I started off, you can't see my background right now, but I'm in the spare bedroom. But I started off, I used to share an office with my wife, and she worked from home anyway. But that lasted a couple of weeks, and then I had to go to the spare room because we could not work in the same room at the same time. And this has become my office at home, or my home at home. It's a funny situation. I'm looking forward to going back to the studio. So waiting for that second shot in a couple of weeks from now, and then figuring out how we all start back in the studio. But I also think it's been one of those things where we've learned a lot about working, trusting designers, and that's one thing that like we try to foster anyway, I think. But trying to maintain relationships has been one of those things. You know, we've started off every morning with our, you know, 9 a.m. meeting, which probably for most of the designers was difficult. 9 o'clock's a little early for a designer. Peter's probably got a different experience with engineers, but but that's been good, at least getting everybody on the same page and seeing where everyone is every day, because that would naturally happen in the studio. I think the one takeaway that I bring out of this is like one of the things that has been really stressed to us, and it's a real designers have to deal with this all the time, is communication. Like communication with your fellow designers, communication with clients, like all of that has just been really heightened this year. And it's not just communication about like everyday business things, what design is going on, but also making connections for us with clients is really important. And that connection is also including like, you know, personal relationships. So I think that's the communication has been the one thing that I've had to get far better at in this past year. So I'll end it there. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, I'm curious about the new tools that you guys have learned, but maybe we can get to some of that in the and sort of question time at the end. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so Peter, partner at an engineering firm. I know that you guys do a lot of work with designers, and you've got a sort of that other perspective, right? Of, you know, you're gonna hire somebody out, but you guys have to make stuff that works. We could in theory get away with making something that looks cool as designers, but an engineer is gonna have to make sure it works. So how do you do the prototypes, and what's it been like from your side?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. My name is Peter Kaltenbach. I'm one of the partners at Pump Studios. We're kind of an unusual firm because we're pretty top heavy. We have 4 partners. out of the currently 9 of us in the company. So it's interesting, but we're similar in many ways to Fahrenheit, but kind of on that counterpart on engineering. And as Kyle mentioned, one of the biggest challenges of being remote is making things, because that's really hard to do just purely virtually or on your kitchen table or wherever you happen to be working. But backing up a little, I think the first point that came to mind when Kyle asked me to present some of our thoughts about this past year was it's actually gone better than I expected. I didn't have high hopes for us working remote. I thought it was going to be extremely challenging, and it has been challenging, but we've actually learned a lot and we've adapted quite a bit. So, we've all had personal challenges, but from a work standpoint, we've been lucky to stay relatively busy. The biggest toll has been on individuals, and it's a work environment that doesn't work for everyone. We started this year at, I think, 11 people, kind of at the midpoint. At the low point, we were down to 6 or 7, and now we're back to about 9. And that wasn't because we didn't have the work to go around. It was just because it didn't work for everyone anymore to do the job we do in this context. And so it was tough in that regard. We never entirely shut down because of that needing to get into the shop and needing to be able to make things. And so early on, we kind of partitioned our desks off with plexiglass so that we could get a little bit of distance. We put in place that we have to wear masks. We have a temperature station coming into the office, and we really limited the occupancy to just 2 or 3 people initially. But that allowed people to go in and use the shop as they needed to. One of the other challenges has been hiring. So, we've had an intern through COVID. We've hired 2 people in the middle of COVID, and getting someone up to speed and teaching them. I completely agree with Adam. There's some things that just can't be taught virtually. So that's been a real challenge. Building community, maintaining culture. You just don't get those kind of organic interactions that you get. You have to make a point of calling someone up or setting up a meeting or chatting them. And you've got to remember to do that outside of all the other work you're getting done. So it's really easy to just forget. And someone sits there, and especially if it's a junior engineer and they're struggling with someone they don't necessarily, or something, and they don't necessarily know to reach out or feel comfortable reaching out. There isn't that kind of reminder, oh, it looks like they're stuck, I should go help out. So that's been tricky. Collaboration is tricky, although we've discovered some new tools. We've issued an iPad to everyone in the office that has good notes on it. We use Miro. So we've actually found we can do brainstorms pretty real time, where we're all sketching, we're uploading images, or we're sketching right into the Miro board. We've invested in a whole fleet of new 3D printers. So we have, when we started this, I think we had 3 3D printers in the office, small desktop size ones. But we went out and bought 3 or 4 more Prusa Mark IIIs that people can take home, and they can have them sit next to them on their desk, and they can be printing and iterating at home just like they would in the office. So that's been a big win for us. It's, I think the big question I have is what's next. And, Mark mentioned, getting his second shot and looking forward to getting back in the office. I think we're in the same boat. We're lucky in that pretty much everyone in our office is in the process of getting a vaccine. And now we're trying to figure out, well, what do we keep? Where do we go next? How do we bring everyone back? How safe is that to do? How much flexibility do we keep? I saw some things in the chat about, +1 for remote work. And there's some real advantages of being able to work remotely that I enjoy. But I don't know if we will be as good as we've been if we were to stay completely remote. So how do you structure that so people don't take advantage of it and other people get the benefit of it? So I know I'm kind of out of time here, but I think the last thing I was going to mention is just the time management has been maybe the last thing that we're still figuring out. And it's because, as Mark mentioned, if you have a 9 a.m. meeting every day, you get everyone on the same page, but that's an hour every day. That probably happens organically throughout the day. And so people get tired of sitting on Zoom calls and sitting in Google Meets. And so we're trying to balance that. How often do we call meetings versus just let people work?
This has been very enlightening. I'm hearing more things that, I sort of had assumptions of what I would hear folks say, but yeah, there's definitely some really interesting things. Okay, so in the chat, one of the questions, kind of to go back, maybe Veronica, if you want to ask all of our speakers to unmute, and then we'll just kind of kick off a couple of questions. So Stephanie, one question that came up is, do you find that others respect your boundaries, right? You were talking about the importance of setting them. And then how do you have the conversation that you're going to take, that you're going to be taking time for yourself?
I guess for me, that hasn't been a super huge issue, because usually those boundaries, like the end of the day is usually pretty late. That might be like 8:30 p.m. just because I'm combining work and school. One thing I have had to balance is, I guess, just more the middle of the day boundaries between the two than the kind of the end of the day one. So I'll block off the time in my Outlook calendar on work of like when I'm working on school, whether that's being in class or just taking time to just do schoolwork. For those conversations, I was very lucky. The people on my team and my boss were very flexible about that and are very good. If I tell them that I have a school commitment, they'll work with me on that. So, yeah.
Cool. Maybe you can give me some tips later about time management, separating that work-life balance. Abigail, question for you. Having the positive mindset while facing rejection over and over is tough. And what advice do you give someone who's losing faith in themselves during their job hunt?
So I think that I was better at doing this for my friends than I was doing it for myself. But one time, one of my best friends, who is so talented, Lucy Cates, you guys might know her, she was like, really, we both went through like a really similar job application process. And I was like, you know what, Lucy, I don't want to hear it anymore. We're going to take the whiteboard and I want you to write down everything that you think you're good at. And it took a while for her to be like, okay, like I do have these things. Like you just, it has to be an active effort to tell yourself, what are you good at? And it can't be involved in the emails and all that stuff. You have to take separate time, make your own headspace and really carve out those things that you like about yourself, which feels really weird. And it feels like, ew, this therapist told me to do this or something. But if you don't do that, like it is tough. So yeah, I think it's better to do it with a friend too.
I think that's really good advice. Bring a friend along.
Yeah.
An advocate, right? Because sometimes it's hard to be an advocate for yourself. You need to have someone to be your cheerleader. No, that's fabulous advice. I have a friend who just got a job as communications guy working for Visa, who had been out of work for over a year, and he lost his job right before COVID started, and it's been like 13 or 14 months. It's hard watching him go through that. I got to be his sounding board. And Josh says he feels like his biggest bully sometimes. Okay, Adam, for you, a couple of questions. One that was my question was, what kind of support are the colleges offering students that were relying on the dorms to provide a roof over their heads?
Sure. Number one would be the assumption that students can actually afford staying in the dorms. So
That's expensive.
So with the incoming freshmen that we have right now, my class, and so there's sort of the COVID generation. Actually, only two can afford to stay in the dorm. So the rest of them can't afford it because the economic situations. So they stay at home or they sort of bunk up with other family members or things like that. The college, to be honest, I think, you know, I don't I don't think universities have actually done a great job. And part of that is because again, they're like, you know, it's like that ship in the Suez Canal. They're universities are very large institutions. And so it's very hard for them to move, unlike
Yeah.
small organizations. So I don't think they've done a great job. A lot of that stuff, I think, happens on the very sort of ground level, grassroots. So when you have students who are in that position, it actually ends up that the interface is really between the student and the teacher versus necessarily the institution. So that's where you're starting to call and, you know, can I find a shelter or blah, 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 or this place, or I know somebody else, could you stay with them, something like
Another question was, you talked a lot about the impacts of mental health, unemployment, poverty during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Do you think this will be a permanent result of COVID? It's like I never said that. And then follow up to that real quick. Is there a way for us to truly recover or even have more equity than before?
that. I think COVID, you know, obviously, I mean, a lot of crap happened the last year or two, right? So with COVID and sort of diversity, equity, and all that has come to the forefront. For some people, it's sort of a new thing. For others, it's like, you know, duh, that's my life. So I think, especially academic institutions, I think they are generally really working towards improving that. I feel at least confident and positive in terms of our institution that this generation of students and the ones after, we can provide better understanding, better resources, and understanding them even better, just not as students, but as people. And in the end, I think that's actually the most important thing. Industrial design is one thing. I get it. You get a job, you love it, the passion, creativity, all that kind of stuff. But in the end, I really do think education is about building a person, and it just happens they're an industrial designer. You know, so I think there's going to be some hard work, but I think we are going in a positive direction, and I think hopefully the next group of students and the students after that, they'll feel the benefit of it.
Yeah, me too. So let's see. Last two questions. For kind, it's a little bit, maybe we can split it, but for Mark and Peter, the tools that you guys have picked up, we'll kind of wrap our evening up with this. Mark, if you want to go first, what are the tools that you're willing to share with the crowd? Your new findings.
We don't have any secret sauce. We sent everybody home with basically their setup. And I think Peter, they work on laptops, but we're all pretty much on desktops. So we just sent everyone home with all their monitors, their Cintiq and everything. Which meant, I mean, Zoom doesn't allow you to do it. Google Meet does. You can share multiple people can share their screens, and we've just used that in terms of sharing screens and brainstorming and stuff like that. And then some of us, when we're brainstorming together, we just use OBS. I don't know if everyone knows what that software is, but streamers use that software. It means you can put your face up in the corner, but you can share your screen at the same time. Anyway. So that's just one way of dealing with wanting to show both what you're working on. And we just use a lot of Sketchbook that way if we're brainstorming. But we also use Miraboard. And that's been good in some ways. I would change that product a lot, having used it now for a year. So many things I would love it to be able to do that I don't understand why it doesn't. But but there are many things about it that were good for us to figure out along the way to get work done. And it has been difficult, like, because I mean, we've used Slack as well, which has been actually a really good place to, like, you need one place to sort of have a repository for things. Email's just not quite right. Yeah. And just figuring, like, sometimes it's an order of operations of, like, I want to talk to this person. How badly do I need to call them, text them, Slack them, email them? Like, it's sort of like work my way down the list. It's like, when do I want my answer, and what form do I want it in, and who else needs to know the answer as well? So I don't know. That comes down to judgment, and we've just been learning together about how that works for everyone. So yeah.
Great litmus test. Peter, how about you?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same. I mean, like Mark said, nothing's really secret when it comes to that. You know, we were lucky in that we started the company kind of basing all our IT around Google Suite. So our email was very easy to move. The hardest thing to figure out was how we managed the files, because we kept everything on a server in the office.
I still haven't figured it out. So
yeah, I mean, it's like we had a server in the office and we had a really slow VPN, and you can't really work over that. So what we ended up having to do is basically replicate our entire server into our Google Drive. You know, we have unlimited storage, and we use FileStream to sync everything. And like I said at the beginning, you know, I think things worked better than I expected. It's not seamless, but it works. You know, we used Miro board. I hate the sketching tools in Miro, but what we found is it's just a good place to sort of keep all the sketches and go from one person to the next. So what I do is I sketch on my iPad, and then I drop it into my Google Drive, and then I drop it into Miro, and I've gotten very quick at that. So I can just sort of quickly get all my sketches up. So we introduce the problem, everyone goes off and sketches, then everyone kind of dumps their sketches into the board, and then we go through it again. So we've kind of got a formula for the brainstorms that works pretty well. And then, you know, the 3D printers, we've been into 3D printers for a long time. You know, we didn't want to buy like a $100,000 printer when we got into it. So our first one was a MakerBot 2, and I still have that in the garage. And we've just sort of tried almost everything that's come out since. But we've really settled on the Prusa's as being just really robust, really easy to move and reset up. They don't need calibration because they have auto mesh leveling on the bed. It's easy to get prints off the bed. So that was one for us, was just finding a really reliable 3D printer that someone could just take home and use. So yeah,
Cool.
A lot of the same stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We're a little bit over, so thanks for everyone for sticking around. Really appreciate the conversation and the perspectives. That, you know, this is sort of exactly what I had hoped to hear from both, you know, everybody from a student to a partner in an office. So really cool to get some of those perspectives.